Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today to hear and see Kevin Reiswig and his wonderful work. He's a sculptor and furniture maker, does wonderful, amazing transformations in wood based in Port Townsend. Thank you, Kevin, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. Thanks everybody for coming out today. And thank you to Bainbridge Arts and Crafts for inviting me to talk and for hosting our work in this lovely gallery. Thanks particularly to all the staff here for helping in putting this show together. I'd also like to thank my co-conspirator for this exhibition, Seth Rowland, who couldn't be here today. I feel very fortunate to have someone I can share all my tree-brained ideas with, and it's been a joy working closely in this way with Seth, so thanks to him. Okay, I prepared a little talk for you all today, and then I think we'll open it up for questions after. So if you think of something you'd like to ask, if you could just hold it until the end, and I'd be happy to see if I can answer it for you then. Let's see. I'm going to begin with a story. And it's one I'm still workshopping, and it doesn't quite have an ending yet, so maybe you can help me figure that out. Here goes. A tree stands in the forest. It started as a tiny sapling, and after hundreds of years and several human lifespans, the tree has grown to enormous size. In a few short minutes, the tree is cut down. The large trunk is loaded onto a truck and brought to a nearby mill. The millwright slices the tree trunk into dimensional lumber, which is placed in a large kiln to dry. Once dried, each board is sent through a machine that shapes a tongue on one edge and a groove on the other. The finished stack of wood is then trucked to a distributor, where it sits in a warehouse for months, maybe even years. Eventually, the wood is sold to a home builder who takes it to their job site. The carpenter cuts, places, and nails each board piece by piece to create a floor. It's sanded smooth, oil is applied, and the floor is allowed time to cure and harden. When the house is done, a family moves in, and the floor is lived on for many years. The floor sustains scratches, dents, and spills. It is cleaned and made dirty over and over again. In spite of heavy use, after decades, the floor remains sound. The family eventually moves away, and a new family moves in. The new family likes the house, but doesn't really like the color of the dining room floor. They would prefer a lighter wood for this space, maybe something a little bit more modern. So they hire a contractor to remove the flooring. The contractor tears out the floor and puts the splintered wood into a dumpster outside, not far from a new stack of tongue and groove lumber, packed on a pallet and placed on the side lawn. I fell in love with wood as a material in the same way many people do. Captivated by the grain, which tells the story of each year of a tree's life in a swirling display of natural architecture. Early in my career as a fine woodworker and furniture maker, I had the fortune to work for some artists who were primarily working with salvaged wood, pulled from gutted buildings, job site dumpsters, or discarded objects left on curbsides or alleyways. Working in this environment taught me how beautiful wood can be beyond its grain. Salvaged wood has embedded stories and conveys its character and life history in every cut that was made, nail that was driven, or dent that was indented. Beyond the beauty I was finding in these materials, it also felt good to reuse waste and keep it from the landfill. The EPA reports that in 2018, wood comprised over 8% of total landfill waste in the United States. That's 12.2 million tons. My love for wood is also intrinsically linked to my love for trees, which I've been curious about for as long as I can remember. Trees provided meaningful refuge for me as a child, and they continue to captivate my imagination more easily than almost anything else I've encountered. Throughout my life, I've gotten to know some things about them, and the more I learn, however, the more mysterious they become and the more apparent it is to me that I know absolutely nothing. The difference in scale between trees and humans in both time and space entrances me. On more than one occasion, I've caught myself while walking through the forest, imagining what it must be like for an ant to walk through a field of grass. For the past decade or so, I've run my own small business, making sculptural furniture almost exclusively from wood. The glaring paradox in my work is that I love trees, but I meddle and peddle with their dead bodies. I ease my conscience about this in several different ways. Firstly, I try to use as much salvage or repurposed wood as possible. Secondly, if I have to buy wood, I try to buy as much locally sourced or otherwise sustainably stamped wood as possible. And thirdly, I've committed to planting more trees than I use each year. Fortunately for me, living in Port Townsend makes it relatively easy to find locally or sustainably sourced wood. And with a density of wooden boat builders and other skilled craftspeople around, finding wood to repurpose has not been exceedingly difficult either. And people are also starting to know me as the guy that will take all their scraps or random pieces of wood piling up in their shop. A few years ago, a friend of mine did just that. And while clearing out the shop, his shop, he decided to bring me a large stack of wood left over from other projects or things that were just kind of in his way. There were some medium-sized scraps, a few rather large boards, some salvaged flooring from the old Port Townsend roller rink, and a box of Pernambuco bow blanks rejected by a local violin bow maker. It was this last item in particular that caught my attention. Pernambuco is a tree that grows in the Amazon rainforest. It is prized especially by bow makers and luthiers for its strength, color, and tonal vibrancy. Because of its prized status over centuries, first as a source of dye pigment and then for its wood, Pernambuco's conservation status is now listed as endangered, and international trade of the wood is restricted. Hence my astonishment when I was handed a full armload of narrowly sliced pieces which never made the grade by our local bow makers. My first thought was, what could I possibly make with this material that would be worthy of this precious tree? At that time, I had recently designed and built several pieces of furniture in which I'd been looking directly at connections of tree branches to inspire their form. In fact, looking around my studio and recalling my previous work, I realized I'd been doing this subconsciously for a very, very long time. As I continued to look around my studio at all the discarded wood that I'd accumulated over the years, I had a second thought. What could I do with all of these materials that would be worthy of all of these precious trees? It was in this context that I decided to begin reconstructing wood into tree branches. My earliest attempts at this process resulted in pieces that looked very similar to the furniture parts I had produced. Then I shifted to looking closely at real-life branches and even using actual branches as models for my constructions. This resulted in more realistic results, not perfect replicas, but then they were never meant to be. The human touch is apparent on each piece. Remnants of the source material provide evidence of the wood's history, and other clues I built in to document the process of reconstruction. Some branches were constructed using fairly straightforward joinery techniques, as you might find in any well-made piece of furniture, such as dovetails, lap joints, and scarfs. Other branches required laminating or gluing together many layers of wood, both to build up thickness with the materials at hand and to maintain strength of the branch through the curves in its form. Laminating layers of small pieces like a brick wall, bit by bit, gave my process the effect of slow growth because I had to wait for glue on each section to harden before I added more. Trying my hand at mimicking the growth of a tree sometimes felt as if I had entered into a greater flow state of natural processes. Other times, it made me feel like a hack and a fool. As a furniture maker, I'm always looking to create strong and lasting connections that are also elegant and beautiful. But nature does it best. Trees are masters of connections. Their bodies connect to themselves and to one another, to the soil, water, air, sunlight, and to a multitude of other living things all at once. And they seem to make these connections as easily as breathing. I worry about trees. Like so many others, I feel a tremendous amount of anxiety about the countless ways in which the environment has been degraded by human activity. There are lots of folks who are hoping that technology will save us from this crisis, and technology will certainly have to play its part. But when I hear this, I also wonder, what if there was a technology that could capture carbon directly out of the air, required little to no maintenance, and was completely solar powered? What if that same technology could automatically turn that stored carbon into food, shelter, and habitat for people and wildlife? What if that same technology could passively regulate climate temperatures, prevent soil erosion, and filter out pollutants from our water supply? This technology already exists in nature, yet we are destroying trees and forests at a dizzying rate, at the very time when we need them the most. I cannot, of course, grow a living tree with glue and clamps on my workbench. But I can, in this and other ways, listen to trees and be inspired by them. And I can try my hand at connecting as trees teach us to connect. I can grow my own awareness and maybe, hopefully, others as well. I can also plant trees. As the famous axiom goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. We have decided to plant a tree for every piece sold in this exhibition. That's all I have for you today, but if you'd like to ask me questions about any specific pieces, I'd be happy to answer, or any other questions that have arisen from this talk. Thank you.
Which pieces use a permabuco?
It's this red piece here. I can show you. This piece sparked a lot of these ideas when I was handed that box of Pernambuco bow blanks. So this is the branch I made with that material.
So you laminated pieces together?
Yeah, so if you look very closely, and I encourage each of you as you're walking around the gallery to use your close-looking eye, because the pieces of wood I had were as thin as these sections here, and this narrow or narrower, and so I had to glue many pieces together to build up this thickness. And then also there's some other technically tricky joinery things that had to happen to change planes, and then of course the sculpting, which takes its own time.
Is that what the tree branch would actually look like, about that width, do you know?
I don't know that I've seen a Pernambuco tree with my own eyes. This branch was modeled off of a different tree. I don't know what one.
Did you have sketches? I noticed that you used some branches as models.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have sketchbooks of these, or did they kind of organically, as you were forming the main stem, just kind of?
Yeah, I worked. I eventually worked directly from a living branch model as my source material. So in that sense, I didn't really need a sketch because I had the thing that I was copying right there. But yes, there are lots of sketches of branch forms in my sketchbook. Yeah.
Curious if you could talk about like the collaborative process with Seth. And
Yeah.
I see like the one piece behind you very clearly, you know, there's an interplay between those two identical pieces.
Yeah.
Like how much otherwise do you guys know what
Seth and I are good friends, and we go on many walks together, and we occasionally teach together, and we're both furniture makers that sort of approach furniture making in a similar way from kind of a sculptural angle. And we're interested in a lot of the same techniques. So in that way, our minds meld on these ideas in a really great way, I feel. Yeah, when we decided to have this exhibition and do this work together, I had already been building tree branches for a few years and knew that I wanted to exhibit these at some point. And Seth started this work a little bit later, but we just kind of like occasionally have little meetings in each other's studios to look at what each other were doing and kind of, lend our critical eye and, encourage each other in various directions as it went. And this piece in particular was kind of interesting. We knew we wanted to do at least one collaborative piece for the show. I had suggested to Seth that maybe he pick, 4 or 5 tree branches from his collection in his studio that he would feel like he could sculpt or do something interesting with. And so once he had picked those out, I went to his shop and picked out the one from those 5 that I thought I would like to copy. And so I took it back to my shop and I copied it. And then I brought both the original branch and the copied branch back to his shop, and he sculpted it in response to what I had done. So that was our process for that piece.
So you glued that all up,
Yes.
and then you took it very squared off, chunky, didn't look anything, of course, like it did, and then you left all that to him to do that.
Oh, no, I did the sculpting on this piece. He did the sculpting on this piece, but he did the sculpting on this piece in response to what I had constructed.
Yeah.
So some of his, the marks with his tools and the way he exposed the cankers of the Madrona, what he left and didn't leave, and what he took away, were all in response to this. As far as I'm aware. I won't speak for him too much. That's what he told me. Yes.
So you've been working on some of these branches for years, you said. Is there anything in that time period and process that you noticed in yourself or in the work that changed as you kind of did different branches?
Well, interestingly, I started out like kind of larger scale. Like the 2 largest constructed branches in this shop were 2 of the earliest pieces I did. And then I realized that I wanted to make more of in a wider variety, and I am able to work on this work kind of on a part-time basis. I have 2 little kids and other work as well. So I just decided I wanted to work on a smaller scale and started to do more instead of focusing on one piece for such a long time. And so that definitely changed. I also, I think it started to become more natural to me, which felt very empowering. Like I said, like sort of like I had tapped into something, or it felt like it was sort of flowing, like sort of in the best way. I don't know if any of you are craftspeople or artists, the best moments in our studio is when you feel that flow, where you're just like totally immersed in what you're doing. And I was finding that happening more easily with these, and sort of like felt like I was able to construct them without thinking so hard. And that was very enjoyable. But yes.
I lost my thought for a minute.
Are you working with a combination of hand tools and power tools when you're sculpting?
I am, yeah. So I'm working with a variety of hand tools and power tools. So cutting the pieces piece by piece with my bandsaw, fitting them together using a disc sander. So those are some of the larger power tools I'm using. And then shaping, we're doing rough shaping with bandsaw, rasp, chisels, spoke shave, draw knife, Dremel tools, grinders, kind of whatever will get the job done. And there are lots of really tight spaces in these that sometimes like a Dremel tool or a power tool will feel a little bit easier to control in those spaces. And also, this is really technical woodworky, but because of the way I laminate the wood, the grain changes directions really abruptly throughout the form, and anybody who's worked with a hand tool blade on wood will know that you want to be going with the grain for the smoothest cut, and so sometimes using a bladed tool will chip out wood more than I want, and I'll have to switch to an abrasive or a rasp, something like that. Yes?
Something that kind of jumped out at me looking at all of these is that your work seems to be, each piece is more individualistic, and your buddy's work over there seems to be recursive or fractalish, where you have repeated pattern in it. Does that represent any sort of difference in philosophy between you and him?
I don't think so, and I actually maybe would respectfully disagree with you. I think there's lots of repetitive fractally forms in this work as well, if you look carefully. I mean, the repetitive nature of these little pieces that I'm constructing out of, first of all, but then even the forms of the branches themselves are based on this like repetitive fractal cell growth that happens in nature. So inspired by that, I mean, I think there's lots of repetition in both pieces, and I think that lends a certain rhythm or connection to the work. Yes?
Can you speak to the kind of training we had to get to this point and build your abilities with wood?
Sure. Well, I started woodworking as a kid, really. My first woodshop class was in middle school. And various odd projects, through my youth. I really started diving into it as when I was in college, and really focused on wood sculpture there. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Studio Art from the College of Worcester in Ohio. And I worked closely with my advisor there, Walter Zerko, and assisted him as a research assistant for a summer. He taught me a lot. I also learned a lot during an internship at Anderson Ranch Arts Center as a summer intern right after college, where I learned a lot of furniture making skills, and worked with a variety of artists there. But I'd say the majority of my technical training has happened on the job. I was hired by some artists in Chicago that I worked with for many years. And I was doing furniture making, finished carpentry. I was fabricating artworks. And really doing that full time for many, many years, and then starting my own business in 2015. So, and then I've also been teaching over the last 4 or 5 years, and that's really taught me a lot as well. It's sort of the best way to learn something is to try to teach somebody else how to do it. Any other questions? Yeah.
To follow up on your teaching,
Uh-huh.
it is the best way to learn is to teach.
Mhm.
Do you envision taking on interns, apprentices in the same fashion that you did as a student?
Yeah, I'd hope to do that someday. I feel like the circumstances of my life at the moment don't feel like they super mesh with that, but I should probably just become more brave and take the leap and try that. So maybe with your encouragement, I can.
Do it.
All right, thank you.
Pay it forward.
I'd like to, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Tree.
Say what?
I was curious about the story behind the tree-like thing that's bolted to the floor.
Oh yeah. This piece, Revival. So this is, there are a few pieces on display in my work that I did not construct from found lumber. But this is a tree that I found in the yard waste section at the dump. And I know you're not allowed to take things from the dump, but I don't care. This tree was too beautiful. I thought it deserved better than to be turned into mulch or whatever. Yeah, I brought it home and took the bark off and carved it by hand. The other piece that I found, the other branch that I found, is this squiggly piece on the wall. That was this piece, Labyrinth. That was a Douglas fir branch I found in the forest that was completely rotten and was basically falling apart in my hands. And I brought it back to my shop and carefully removed the bark and dyed it black and then saturated it with a penetrating epoxy to make it really hard again so it wouldn't be so fragile. And then I filled all the bug holes with wood filler and then burnished the wood filler back to highlight all the bug traffic. So lots of people ask if I've done that with, like I'm a super talented calligrapher or something, but no, this is all the bugs, it's all nature.
I was impressed, I thought that you had
Pretty good with wood filler.
Yes.
What do you want to do that you haven't done yet?
Great question. I would love to do larger installations with this method. Especially if there was some personal connection to a space or something, if there was something that was torn down that I could bring back to life as this, like a thicket of branches would be my kind of dream installation with this work. That's sort of where I was headed with the two larger branches. I sort of had this vision of just having like a density of these branches that you would encounter and in some space. But yeah, I would like to make more.
What causes a canker?
You would have to ask Seth. He knows more about it than I do, but my understanding is that it's a fungus. That's kind of like the early stages of decay of tree, particularly this fungus that affects madrona. So it's kind of, but then you also see like the tree starting to heal around them. So it's all at once, sort of the early stages of death and life really finding a way. Any other questions?
Just a comment. I'm impressed with the amount of time you were able to put into some of these pieces. Like your tree over there, you didn't carve that overnight.
No, sir.
Do you have much of your own salvage? And what happens to that?
Oh, like when I make furniture? Yeah, yes.
Yeah, or even with your art piece, you're laminating.
Yeah, so,
Complete precision on the sizing.
right, yeah, so I do try to use all of my wood waste. You know, I'm not sending anything to the landfill. But sometimes that use is, you know, whether it's sawdust that I put on my garden or to tamp down weeds, or maybe it's put into my, my wood stove during the winter to keep my family warm. That's kind of one of those things. Or I'm using it, you know, I try to whittle my scraps down to little pieces. I definitely use, I definitely keep scraps probably longer than most woodworkers, which is when, you know, I think that can be maddening for some people, but I try to just roll with it. I just really like the little pieces too.
How did you and Seth get to know each other? Was it in Port Townsend?
It was in Port Townsend. So I moved to Port Townsend in 2017, and when I was knew I was going to be moving to town, I looked up woodworkers in the area, and I actually saw that Seth lived in Port Townsend, and I recognized his work from just knowing his work from before, like, you know, in the sense that I know a lot of national woodworkers' work, and I was like, oh, that guy lives in Port Townsend, I got to reach out to him. And we did, and you know, we met up and became fast friends. So.
How did you get the idea for the roller rink piece? That's so different from everything else.
Yeah, right. So, so hollow stump roller rink. That was, I mentioned in my talk, some of the original Port Townsend roller rink floor. And I had been, you know, making branches, but I was kind of thinking, what other parts of a tree could I create? So I decided to try my hand at making a hollow stump form. I had the vision for how I could cut these pieces and assemble them into a stump form, while also maintaining a lot of the original material, the source material, to sort of show what that was. And I've tried to do that with lots of different pieces. You know, desk drawers. This piece on the back was made out of an old oak desk, and so at the ends of every branch termination, you see dovetails from the drawers. This piece here, broken piano, is made out of pieces of wood made from an old piano. The piece in the corner back, the large branch in the corner, is actually the piece I made out of that dining room floor. So that's the dining room floor. These beetle kill pine pieces were made from a friend's wall cladding from her tiny house that she had scrap left over. Is Jillian. Any other questions? That's all. Thank you very much.
We hope you'll join us for Tree-isms, a spectacular display of woodworking skill featuring works by Seth Rowland and Kevin Reiswig.